Thank you for joining IAB There.
Hi, I'm Orchid Richardson, Senior Vice President of the Programmatic and Data Center, and I'd like to welcome you to IAB There, our daily live stream in which we connect the digital advertising ecosystem. I'd like to say a special thank you to our sponsor for today, IBM Watson Advertising. And I'd like to welcome our two speakers, Phil Kinsler, who happens to be partner of ecosystem and product marketing lead for IBM Watson Advertising, and Lucy Markowitz, VP of US National Sales at Vista Media. Phil, why don't I turn it over to you to start the conversation?
Thank you, Orchid, for the introduction. As mentioned, my name is Phil Kinsler. I promise you I'm not in an underground bunker somewhere, but I am with IBM Watson Advertising. I am the ecosystem and partner marketing lead. I also work on our data product solutions from a marketing perspective. IBM Watson Advertising brings AI at scale to the advertising industry through a suite of cookie and identifier-free solutions that help brands reach consumers in privacy-forward ways. In addition to our targeting solutions like weather targeting, we offer solutions across creative, measurement, and media, including on our owned and operated The Weather Channel digital properties. Before we dive into the main event, though, I thought it'd be great to get to know my friend, my partner in crime, Lucy Markowitz. So, Lucy, are you ready for you in 60 seconds?
I'm ready. Hit me with it.
All right. Sunrise or sunset?
Definitely sunset, not an early riser.
Excellent. I feel that. Beach or pool?
Beach. I would happily be on a beach right now if I could be.
That is fantastic. And again, I agree. All right. Coffee or coffee?
I mean, I feel like just because I'm representing New York right now, I have to say coffee and go with that.
Excellent. All right. I will let that go for now. Cookies or cake?
Ooh, definitely cookies. I think I've perfected the recipe with a little extra sea salt during quarantine, though it's worked out well with only wearing athleisure for the last year.
All right, well, you're gonna have to share that, at least with me. Okay.
Yeah.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs. Still looking for my perfect buddy.
I got two upstairs that might start barking at some point. So you can have, I'm happy to ship one up to New York.
Perfect.
Green thumb or what have I done?
Ooh, it's kind of a mix and match. I've gotten a lot of plants during quarantine, but there is one tree that I can see out of the corner of my eye that just like, it's been a rough go, but some of the other ones are definitely thriving.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you for that. I hope everyone has a chance to get to know you through that.
Awesome. So with that, I'm going to return the favor and get to know you in 60 seconds. So first, I know we don't have your baseball memorabilia behind you, but pitching mound or at bat?
Well, a perfectly executed curveball is a thing of ethereal beauty, but nothing beats the crack of the bat on a home run.
All right. What about as our Atlanta resident, y'all or you all?
Oh, bless your heart. It's y'all.
Hamilton or Schitt's Creek?
Hamilton's a work of art, but Schitt's Creek has honestly been a source of comfort over the course of the pandemic. I actually let my kid watch the first episode last night, which might have been a mistake, but I think he enjoyed it as much as we did.
I mean, how is it possible to not love the roses?
They're delightful.
Cycling or running?
Running, but ask me again in a month because that indoor spin class addiction is real.
And Alaska or Hawaii to cap it off?
I gotta say Alaska by a long shot. I've been there twice. I've had the great opportunity to go there twice. My spirit animal is the moose. Saw a bear. It's just beautiful. Awesome. Okay. Yes. Thank you. All right. Well, Lucy, we got to know a little bit about you a minute ago, but could you tell us a little bit about Vistar Media?
Yeah, of course. So Vistar is an out-of-home programmatic technology platform. And essentially, especially for this conversation, one of our main goals is really to help brands and agencies better access digital out-of-home inventory in a way that's data-driven, measurable, and flexible.
Excellent. That's great. And Vistar has been a tremendous partner of Watson Advertising for a number of years. And again, we're so grateful and thankful that you are taking the time to join us today. Well, let's get into the meat of this. I'm going to ask some questions and love to get your perspective on things. So let's start with, in the spirit of of our program, what do you feel defines high quality data?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple attributes that to me sort of embody the concept of quality. One is the source of the data. So knowing where it comes from and kind of understanding how it was derived. Accuracy is a big part of that. Obviously dependent on the type of data, making sure that the information that you're getting is actually accurate. The less modeled, the better. That being said, scale is a huge component as well, which sometimes does require some of that modeling involved. I think making sure that privacy concerns are obeyed, especially in the world that we're living in now. And then really the last thing is about the value that it's going to actually bring to the end user. Because I think with quality data, often there's a cost associated. And so I would say if the data is free, there is probably some sort of limitation on some of these attributes being hit.
For sure, for sure. In the spirit of data, we know that the future is fast approaching, where third-party cookies have been deprecated, mobile identifiers have been changed. So those trusted high-quality data sets that you just mentioned are going to be of the utmost importance. Can you talk about how Vistar is poised to take advantage of the changes, both kind of from a front-end display and back-end data perspective?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to just recognize generally about out of home is that it is a one-to-many medium, and you want to make sure that you're kind of leveraging that to the fullest. And so, thinking about how data is used in out of home is just a little bit different than in a digital world, because what you're trying to do is understand how you can ensure that your ad is reaching the right person at the right time with the right messaging. But it's usually, that multiple group of people that is going to be in front of that screen. So, for a long time, to a degree, out of home almost was at a disadvantage because it is a cookieless environment. So I think one, out of home is now kind of back in the forefront as a very privacy safe way to target consumers. But just because you can't use cookies or couldn't in the past, it doesn't mean that you can't use data. The first thing is the ability to use device IDs is still prevalent in kind of outdoor, especially with location data. But with increased levels of privacy, one of the things that we've really been looking at Vista are what are other pervasive data sets in out of home that we can use that don't have any sort of personal identifier tied to them. And I think weather is one of them. And it's something that really affects everyone. You wake up, you check the weather before you get dressed. If, in COVID, maybe you don't leave your house for 3 days, but when you are ready to, out of home and weather go hand in hand. It's the screens are located outside, and so are sort of those weather conditions. So I think that being able to let brands use this data and other types of trigger targeting in a compelling way is sort of a perfect storm, if you will, for out of home.
Excellent. Great pun. I am an aficionado of weather puns for sure. And I definitely think that we've seen, our research has shown over the course of the pandemic that people are diving into weather on a regular basis, honestly, in a bit of a much different way than they did prior to the pandemic. They're using almost that hourly forecast to figure out when they can get outside. We know that, outside has typically been a safer place to gather. So it just makes sense that the combination of weather and outdoor advertising and out of home advertising kind of come together really nicely. But let's talk a little bit more about weather. As the parent of the Weather Channel digital properties, we know that weather is that data that can predict consumer behavior and action based on its emotional impact. Weather, as you mentioned, kind of a privacy-friendly data source. It's perishable. It's constantly changing, and we know that that enterprises, large and small, are using it in multiple ways, from supply chain to staffing, operations, merchandising, and our sweet spot advertising. What do you think is driving that interest around weather? A little bit more than just kind of the getting outside component. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the successes that you've seen?
Yeah, I think in general, part of what is driving the interest is just the results. with out of home, I think measurability has really come into focus a lot because it's not a screen that you can click on where there is sort of that inherent engagement benchmark. You have to kind of run larger studies to understand what it's actually driving. Is it driving people into store? Is it, is there higher engagement driven by retargeting of people that saw at a home? Is it higher brand awareness? And I think what we're seeing is that depending on the KPI, when we add in those weather triggers and then sort of match the creative and the messaging to be around weather, it is very compelling for consumers. And that sort of shows in the research and the campaign, studies that we've done. And I think that really the last thing I'll say about weather is that it's not something you need to buy into. Like, people see the value, and then when it starts becoming thinking about how to use it, I feel like that's where a lot of that education is still increasing. Is I think often people just think about weather super simplistically, where I think that there's so many other components and ways that you can use this weather data that is not really at the surface. And even just thinking about verticals that have leaned in, it's not just your cold and flu and your CPG brands. It's also, entertainment brands and, alcohol brands and things like that. So I think just sort of expanding our horizons of like what weather or what weather data actually means, and then tying that to results is very impactful.
I truly agree. I could talk for hours, but I won't, about the anecdotal and data-driven insights that we see about how weather impacts consumer behavior and how advertising can drive that action. We've done a lot of research on our end. We know that strawberry Pop-Tart sales spike when hurricanes are forecast. We know that ice cream sales increase not just when it's warm, but also when it's cold, because consumers are craving comfort. And we know that hard seltzer has started to steal market share from beer, presenting an opportunity for both brands and both groups as the weather warms and consumers are more concerned about those perceived lighter, healthier options. So knowing that weather drives behavior in ways that have both been intuitive, but also a little bit less inherent, how can we leverage that to make that connection more impactful?
Yeah, well, I think it's sort of this coming together of whether the actual medium, or in this case, often like it could be a literal canvas or, often large digital screen, and then the creative. And I think there's just an opportunity to have a little bit of fun. I think that can be for the most basic of it's raining. We've seen brands kind of use these large out-of-home screens to show, Timberland is a brand that we've worked with that had, a boot out on the screen and then actual rain falling in front of it, which, it feels like it's just blending into your surroundings. And even kind of going back to some of the things you said, I feel like I need to set up a meeting with Hershey's and talk to them about, when it is a little colder one day, and we kind of get back into the fall weather of thinking about when it's snowing, and you're stocking up on things and having a creative that shows someone with a mountain of candy sitting on their couch. I think part of it is using all of the tools at your disposal to do something that's going to drive some sort of an emotional impact on that consumer based on what they see. And I think that out of home gives you that big screen to do it on and get that message out. Weather allows for that content or context and relevancy to be there. And then on top of that, when you have that creative and you make sure that it fits the messaging or that it can be rotated with different conditions, I think it really like resonates with the people that are walking by it and see it to then go and buy your product.
Oh, for sure. I remember, a few months ago, there was there's an article that was released showing the correlation between increasing rates of COVID and purchase of chocolate for s'mores. So I definitely think there's a great connection between comfort and s'mores, and drawing that inherent connection between the product, the context, and the screen, I think is a really great way to have some impact. Talking about the pandemic, earlier kind of earlier towards the start of it, we at IBM Watson Advertising leveraged our weather targeting methodology, including IBM's Watson AI, to build triggers that helped advertisers reach consumers using local COVID rates, both increasing and decreasing. This, of course, helped brands message with empathy based on how cases are trending at the local level. Think grocery delivery versus in-store shopping, or food delivery versus pickup, or even the ability to go outside and play in a park and get some outdoor activities and recreation done. Even with the huge scientific success of the vaccines rolling out nationwide, we still have areas where cases just haven't come down quite as quickly. So how do you think we can continue to help brands reach consumers in a safe environment and appropriate empathetic way?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is that I learned early on is, even if certain places are open, there's a hesitancy from brands unless it's truly deemed as a safe place to go or an environment to be in. Do they want their brand to be encouraging some sort of action or be associated with something that is kind of controversial in its safety? So I think the first thing is that brands want to run where people are out and about, especially in outdoor. You want to make sure people are going to see your ad, but they also want to make sure that that brand messaging is associated with driving actions that are safe. So for instance, if we can see that cases are decreasing in a particular market, if a retailer is trying to drive people into store, that's a great way of identifying that market's going to have people out and about because the cases are down. There's probably less restrictions, but it's also actually safe to be driving people into those stores. On the flip side, I think there's also, when you talk about messaging with empathy, if the cases are increasing, it's an opportunity for brands to sort of support the local community, whether it's to support frontline workers, encourage people to be ordering their food in as opposed to being out and about, talking about more delivery grocery services and things like that. So part of it can be, of course, to drive increases in sales, but also to make sure that you're kind of supporting the people in your community that are taking care of, everyone else. And then also to kind of encourage actions that are safe.
For sure. With our weather targeting product, because we're available across the ecosystem, whether it's programmatic display, search, social, digital video, and of course, out of home, advertisers are able to leverage that consistent privacy-forward targeting strategy that we mentioned earlier across all facets of their campaign. I think it's a pretty unique opportunity that a brand can take one consistent trigger, apply it to every component of their campaign, and be able to measure almost an apples to apples result. So can you tell me, I know we've talked about this a little bit, but tell me how your clients are leveraging out of home in particular to achieve their goals. How much more relevant has the channel become as the country and the world, fingers crossed, emerges from the pandemic?
Yeah, well, I think sort of outside of the data itself, I don't know about you, but I'm starting to feel more of this like glimmer of hope and optimism. And part of that is driven by the fact that, the vaccine rollout has been successful. We are seeing more people on the road and on the street. And then, aside from the weather triggers, but like we are just getting into a time of year where around the country, it is better weather. It's a reason for people to be out and about. And what we found is with so many people working from home, doing school from home, is that the time that people spend outside is really the highlight of their day. And so kind of outside of just the fact that people are now there's an opportunity for brands to talk to that consumer and kind of take advantage of this being like a lighter moment of their day and kind of that moment of joy versus feeling like they're, locked in a room or their basement or hiding in the bathroom trying to take Zoom calls away from their family. Like we're all just trying to work with what we've got. And I think in addition to that, with all of the ability to take, data and things like where you guys have been working across digital properties for a very long time. And I know, our partnership isn't new, but I think that being able to take a consistent strategy and, now start bringing out of home into that fold with your social display and mobile and CTV, and now be able to incorporate that same consistent message across all of those screens. We're seeing that uptick in brands believing in out of home again, which is really awesome.
That's wonderful. And we know, especially as the weather warms, as the seasons change, people are absolutely hungry to get outside. I think we too have seen that kind of glimmer of optimism and hope in the research that we've done. We know that spring, like any season change, but more, spring almost more so than anything else, offers that opportunity for renewal, refresh, to make changes. So it's such a great space to be in right now, especially when you can look at the combination of weather and out of home. But let's talk technology. Let's turn a second. So at Watson Advertising, we believe that AI is the key to ensure advertisers are able to create compelling, relevant messaging without the use of cookies or identifiers. And specifically, when it comes to data, we've leveraged AI to analyze, aggregate, and optimize increasingly large and complex data sources like weather to find patterns upon which we can activate. What this means, of course, is that AI can power the increased prevalence of privacy-forward segments that don't need any PII, any cookies, any mobile identifiers for accurate targeting. So can you talk about how Vistar is using advanced technologies like AI, dynamic creative, et cetera, to power innovation in the digital out-of-home space?
Yeah, so I think that out of home and kind of looking at why programmatic has made an impact is because the space is so fragmented. So being able to create a simplified way of activating across hundreds of thousands of screens through the US, and then obviously many more internationally, that takes some real technical wizardry on the back end. But I think thinking about even, as far as we've come in out of home, it's still a fragmented space with a lot of underlying technology that is sort of being strung together, and trying to figure out how to unify that can be really difficult, especially when it comes to something like dynamic creative, where you are a little bit cut off at the knees based on what type of technology you're working with and kind of that lowest common denominator. So I think that some of the benefits that I think about using things like trigger data is the ability to kind of take advantage of how far we've come, but also recognize some of the shortcoming, and being able to use something like weather data to give the feeling of dynamic creative at scale with kind of more of these like binary triggers. So a good example of that is to only show allergy ads when the pollen count is high. If you think about it, like if you're actually sneezing by a screen, and then you look up and there's an ad for Zyrtec or Allegra, there's a high probability that that's going to be the brand on your mind when you go into a store to try and, help yourself. I think outside of that too, it's also being able to have multiple messages that can be out where you sort of rotate them based on what is true, and also be able to think about a scalable national option where, it could be snowing in Utah, but it could be 90 degrees in Florida. And so how do you set up a campaign where you have creatives associated on the back end with different conditions, and you can set up a campaign very easily that way that's going to fire those ads where it's relevant and going to have a meaningful impact. And that can be on your same campaign. You take out any of that sort of manual work, but also manual ability for things to go wrong if you're just sort of turning things on based on the fact that you're watching the weather and trying to do it. So I think part of it is using what we have. Obviously, the continuation of making tech better, that's going to continue happening. But at the same time, being nimble and using some of these incredible tools at our disposal allows for us to make advances, especially while we're in progress of working on other things.
Excellent, thank you. This is a tremendous conversation. I think we can clearly talk for hours here, but I think this is a good place to close. the industry's at an inflection point, clearly, but data and technology can help lead the way into the future, can help break the cycle of stale targeting, of stale data, and offer opportunities for brands to take their message anywhere, even outside and out of home, especially. Lucy Markowitz, thank you so much for your time today. And thanks to the IAB for having us. I wish everyone a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks, Phil and Lucy. That was a great conversation. Certainly some interesting nuggets for everyone to take away. I would like to thank you all for joining. A special thank you to IBM Watson Advertising again for sponsoring this episode. IAB There is a production of the Interactive Advertising Bureau. Our show today was produced by Connor Healy and John Ward. I'm Orchid Richardson, and thank you for joining.